I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Tom and I don't always review the most pop or synth pop music. We have been accused on this channel of not loving electronic music.
True.
We have.
Yes.
It's just something like, you're a rock guy.
I am.
Right? I'm an indie rock guy. I really like guitars.
Yes.
Yes. And so when you replace those guitars with synthetic elements, it gets a little bit cumbersome to have to sit through, especially if it's not the most experimental work that you've ever heard. But it does, there are albums out there, like something like Boards of Canada, that does spark our interest from time to time.
Definitely.
John Hopkins' Immunity.
Yep.
There's been a lot of memory tapes, for instance.
Definitely.
You know, but today we have a brand new band from Scotland.
Yes.
They're called Chvrches. This is their first album, The Bones of What You Believe. This is very much a synth pop record.
Yeah.
I would put this in this, like, Metric Synthetica really came to mind. I felt like this sounded a lot like that.
Only even dancier,
yeah,
even
absolutely.
poppier.
Tom, how would you describe this album in sound, and taking it from the synth pop? And then what was your reaction to The Bones of What You Believe?
Well, you know, you set that up really well, and I don't think there's a whole lot to go with beyond that. You know, talk about the vocals a little bit. There's a female vocalist kind of at the forefront. Also male vocalists in there that comes on, you know, on some of the tracks. And so I think that right there provides a little bit of variety because it almost makes a kind of dialogue throughout the album.
Right.
Also, though, what you're getting with this album is, while it is kind of dancey, while it is pretty poppy and synth-oriented, you can still tell that they're putting a lot of just raw emotion behind the songwriting, behind the vocal performances. And I mean, that's the thing, you know, like you said, we get accused of not liking electronica a lot. And a lot of what it is for me is I need that human element in the performance to connect to. And you can get that from a compositional standpoint with electronica, but, you know, when it comes to the programming of these synths and electronic components, really one person is doing it the same as another person. You don't get the performance aspect. You get the songwriting aspect, so it just makes the composition come in more.
Do you? Because it's so easy to create electronic music. Now, I know I'm going to get... I know it's not quite as easy, but what I mean by that is it doesn't take years of experience learning and perfecting an instrument and then going in and then doing that. So, I mean, but the real songwriting talent, I feel like, comes in with experimentation, with variety, with new ideas.
And I see what you mean there, because you're right. You don't have to master an instrument to become an electronic composer, per se. You more have to master software and a mindset.
Just plain devil's advocate.
I still think that songwriting plays a huge part, because that emotional appeal comes into the melodies, comes into the chord structures. You still have all of that, even if you're using electronic components.
And Chvrches does that very well.
Yes,
and I would say that the vocalist Lauren Mayberry actually is the highlight of this band for me. Because even though I feel like a lot of the synth melodies that they're creating are actually very well done and very well constructed in the sense that they're providing this strong sense of melody, mood, and atmosphere all at once with all the different layers that they're doing. I really liked that, but that's been done before. They're doing it very well, but it's been done before. And so, I mean, especially in the past few years, just the state that technology is in right now has just made that super... It's super accessible, so we're hearing a lot of it.
Yeah, so from there it's all about, what do you have to say? What do you have to bring to the table that someone hasn't done before?
And Lauren Mayberry's vocals are
and that is the differentiating factor.
Yes, that is what Chvrches brings to the table. Her voice is so good. So good. It reminds me, the way, but it's not even that. It's how she constructs her vocal melodies. The way that she creates these iconic is the word that comes to mind, these vocal parts that just stick in your head and you can't get them out. They're just perfectly designed. But then she's also able to pack so much emotion behind it too. Her voice is delicate, yet it has a lot of power, which doesn't make any sense. That dichotomy, though, is what makes it so addictive in my mind. And also it allows her to put a lot of that passion behind her vocals. Now, the male vocalist has a couple tracks on here where I feel like he does a very good job as well, and it does add that variety, but I mean, Lauren's vocals is where it's at. I mean, I really feel like that far and away stole the show for me.
It really is, and I'll tell you, at first, I hated this album.
Really?
Because, and I've said it before, I said it for Tegan and Sarah's Heartthrob.
Which reminds me a lot of this.
Definitely. And I just have this gag reflex to that dance pop sound where I just hate it at first. And it's all because I hate the general sound aesthetic. But from there, I have to do my, my due diligence of the albums that we review and get to know the song construction. And that's where the really high quality of this album comes in. Now, the production is still good for what it is. It's not a production style that I'm too keen on, but I have to give credit to good songwriting when I hear it. And let me tell you, there are some killer tracks on here. A few of these tracks will probably end up being some, contenders for some of my favorites of the year. Really, where it goes from there is just that it's a little bit inconsistent. And I think the album repeats itself just a tad bit, but songs like Tether, for example, that was a track pick of yours. It probably would have been my next track pick if I picked another one. It does a great job of slowing things down so it's not as quite as dancey and in your face. It's a little more subtle, it's a little more sentimental, and I think it really succeeds on that level. It also strays from kind of your typical verse-chorus structure a little bit. So I really applaud them on that track for mixing it up a little bit. But there are some tracks that I just wasn't too keen on. I know that you really liked the last track. I wasn't a huge fan of the last two tracks.
I thought it sounded a lot like Washed Out. It kind of departed from the rest of the sound of the album, but it was more experimental in nature, and so therefore it sucked me in a little bit more. I thought it was a really nice closer.
And it's also interesting that they chose to end the album with the male vocalist.
And the longest track on the album.
Yeah. So
it was just
they're thinking about these things.
It was kind of a curveball. And with any first album, you generally have a lot of different songs that you've been working with over the past couple of years. Which, Chvrches actually has had a couple singles that have been floating around getting a lot of buzz on the internet. So when this comes out, I think this is getting a pretty good reception. Now, what I was surprised by is there's a couple tracks on here, one of them being a track pick of yours, Lungs, track 10, which is a little bit more progressive in nature. They do a good job of actually mixing it up and experimenting with their sound. Now, there's I'd say it's a little bit more like 60 to 70% of the tracks on this album are much like power pop choruses, and that's where, and some of them are better than others in my opinion. There's a couple, Gun, one of the singles, has a huge power synth chorus, and I think Recovers one of those tracks, and even Lies. Tether is kind of has that big chorus feel. I just feel like they do it well sometimes, and other times it just feels a little bit generic. And that's where my biggest criticism of this album comes in. There's a lot of track disparity here. Some of these tracks are just up here, and the rest of them are here.
And I think that they're, as a debut in this genre, I think they're a step ahead of the rest. But at the same time, what they're going to have to do in the future to really set themselves apart, work on the songwriting just a little more, making it more consistent. They obviously know how to, they just need to be more consistent with it. But also just doing more with the sound palette to set themselves apart. This is a genre where it's really easy to pigeonhole yourself in just something, kind of...
generic.
Yeah, generic, exactly, and become complacent and okay with just doing the usual. But, the whole point of electronic music is that you can do anything with it. You can make any kind of sound you want, so just going for what you hear on pop radio or even indie pop, indie electronic pop, I feel like there's really no excuse for it. And that's where a lot of electronic fans bash on us for liking guitar-based stuff so much, because they say, well, anything that's been done, anything you can do with a guitar has been done. And I would disagree with that, because it's like I said, that's where the human element comes in. I don't think that any two guitarists play guitar the same way. But
style.
Yeah, exactly, but it's hard to get that performance style in electronic music. You have to do more with the sound palette.
Fair point. What are you going to give this one?
I'm going to give this a 75.
You're actually higher than me.
I am shocked.
I'm shocked too. I'm going to go 73. Averages out to a 74 from us. That's actually a pretty solid album. I know it sounds like a C to those of you academics out there. Don't worry about the numbers. It's all about how it fits into our scoring system. A mid-70s album score should mean to you guys that it's a solid record. It may not be the most mind-blowing or experimental or revolutionary album that has come out in the past 10 to 20 years, but it's probably still a pretty decent listen. So if you like synth pop or power pop or female vocal leads that write really catchy music, Chvrches is a great band to introduce yourself to, since they're so new on the scene. The Bones of What You Believe is their debut album. Go check it out. Leave us a comment at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Let us know what albums you would like to see us review on this YouTube channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Movie Music Critique Forward.